tutorial on dividing with single-digit divisors. Today we're going to go through all the steps of division. We're going to talk about common mistakes, and we're going to learn how to check our work. Let's go ahead and get started. Before we start dividing, we need to make sure we know all the terms for the parts of a division problem. The number that we divide into is called the dividend. We can remember this because it's inside the den. Like this is the house, and that helps you remember that's called the dividend. The number that we use to divide the dividend is called the divisor. And finally, our answer is called the quotient. Now that we know our terms, let's go ahead and start a problem. 1,235 divided by 5. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to put what we call parking spaces over top of every number in the dividend. These parking spaces help us stay organized throughout the problem. Our steps to dividing: first we must divide, then multiply, then subtract, and then bring down. We have to complete all 4 of these steps for every parking space that we have in our problem. There are a couple ways to remember these steps. One way is daddy, mother, sister, brother. Divide, multiply, subtract, bring down. Another is, does McDonald's sell burgers? You pick the way you like the best. Let's get to dividing. Our first step is to divide. Anytime we divide, we always ask ourselves the same question. We ask ourselves, how many times can the divisor go into the first number? So, how many times can 5 go into 1? The answer is 0 times. 5 cannot fit into 1. So we're going to write a 0 in our parking space. That's divide. Then we're going to multiply. 5 times 0. We can put a little multiply sign here to help us remember that's what we multiply. 5 times 0 is 0. Now, we're working with this parking space, so this is the area we need to be working in. We then subtract. 1 minus 0 is 1, and then we need to bring down. That is one complete step of division. I'm going to go ahead and erase my check marks because every time we come to a new parking space, we start over again. The only thing that's different now is instead of looking at the top, we're going to look where we brought down. So the next question I ask myself, how many times can 5 go into 12? It's like we're moving the problem down. 5 can go into 12 2 times. That was divide. Anytime you write in your parking space, that's when you divide. Then we're going to multiply. 5 times 2 is 10. And then we're going to subtract. We're left with 2. Our final step, bring down. Be careful, you can only bring down one number at a time. And that's our second round in this long division problem. Now that we've completed all 4 steps, we're going to start over. We're going to divide. How many times can 5 go into 23? 5 can go into 23 4 times. And that's divide. 5 times 4 is 20. That's our multiply. We're going to subtract, and we're left with 3. And then we're going to bring down our 5. Our final parking space. First, we're going to divide. How many times can 5 go into 35? 5 goes perfectly into 35 7 times. 5 times 7 is 35. We subtract. Now I've divided, I multiplied, now I'm subtracting, and I get 0. And there's nothing left to bring down, so we don't have to do that step. When you're finished and you filled up all your parking spaces, you've subtracted and there's nothing left to bring down, you are finished. So our answer is 200 and 47. Just to make sure, we need to check our work. To check our work, we say do Elvis hair. What we mean by that is that you need to multiply your divisor and your quotient. 5 times 247, and we should end up with our dividend 1,235. If you don't know what Elvis hair looks like, there it is. I think you could probably see the resemblance. All right, let's get to checking. 247 times 5. 5 times 7 is 35, carry the 3. 5 times 4 is 20, plus 3 is 23, carry the 2. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 2 is 12. They match up perfectly, so we did this problem correctly. Let's go to the next. 975 divided by 2. Up at the top, you'll notice that I have my acronym written out, DMSB, divide, multiply, subtract, bring down. It's a good idea to always have that at the top of your paper just so you can look back to it. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my parking spaces above every number in my dividend, help us stay organized. The first thing I do is divide. I need to ask myself, how many times can 2 go into 9? Well, I know 2 times 4 is 8, and that's as many times as it can go in, so that's 4. That would be our divide. 2 times 4 is 8. That's our multiply. Then we subtract. 9 minus 8 is 1. And then we bring down the 7. Next, we start over again. How many times can 2 go into 17? 2 can go into 17 8 times. 2 times 8 is 16. Then we subtract. 17 minus 16 is 1. And then we bring down the 5. Let's move to our final parking space. How many times can 2 go into 15? 2 goes into 15 7 times. 2 times 7 is 14. We then subtract 1 and then bring down. We have nothing to bring down, so we are finished. Unlike the last problem, we have a number at the bottom that we're left over with. That's called our remainder. So the answer to this problem, 487, remainder 1. You'll find some problems have remainders while others don't. We can still check to make sure this is the right answer by doing Elvis here. We're going to do 487 times 2. 2 times 7 is 14, carry the 1. 8 times 2 is 16, plus 1 is 17, carry the 1. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9. You'll see that we're 1 off. That's because anytime you have a remainder, you need to add your remainder at the end of your multiplication. We're going to add that 1, and we do end up with 975, which is exactly our dividend. We did it right. Let's do one more problem before we wrap up. I chose this problem on purpose because it has a couple things that might trip you up. The first thing we're going to do is put our parking spaces, just like always. Now, the first thing that might trip you up is the fact that we're using 8. Sometimes 8s can be troublesome multiplication facts to memorize. So what I suggest to do, go ahead and write your facts over to the side. When you write your facts down, take your time. Do repeated addition if you need to make sure you get those numbers right. Remember, you're only going to ever have to go to the number 9 with your facts. This might take a little time up front, but it will be worth it as you divide. Now we can get started. The first thing we need to do is divide. We ask ourselves, how many times can 8 go into 4? 8 is bigger than 4, so it can't go in at all. It can go in 0 times. That's our divide. 8 times 0 is 0. That's our multiply. We then subtract. 4 minus 0 is 4. and then we bring down the 2. That's one round in our long division. So we're going to go ahead and erase our checks and start over. We're going to ask ourselves, how many times can 8 go into 42? Now this is when our facts are going to be helpful. We can see that 8 times 5 is 40, which would fit, but 8 times 6 is 48. That's too big. We want to get as close as we possibly can to this number without going over. So that would be 8 times 5 is 40. So 8 can go into 42 5 times. That's our divide. We already have over to the side that 8 times 5 is 40. We subtract, we multiply, we subtract, and that gives us 2, and then we need to bring down. These facts over here really made it easy for me to figure out quickly how many times 8 went into 42. Let's go ahead to our next step. How many times can 8 go into 20? 8 times 2 is 16, which fits. 8 times 3 is 24, too big. So I'm going to have to go with my 8 times 2. 8 can go into 20 2 times. That's my divide. 8 times 2 is 16. That's multiply. Then we need to subtract. 20 minus 16 is 4. And then we bring down. Let's go ahead and do our last parking space. How many times can 8 go into 47? I'm going to consult my list again over here. 40 and 48 will be too big, so we're going to have to go with 8 times 5. 8 times 5 is 40. We subtract, and we get 7. We have no more numbers to bring down, so we're finished. 7 is going to be our remainder. A quick note, if your remainder is larger than your divisor, let's say remainder 8 or remainder 9, something went wrong in your division. Your remainder is always going to be smaller than your divisor. Let's go ahead and check this problem to make sure it's right. We're going to do Elvis here. 525 times 8. And at the end, we're going to add that remainder. 8 times 5 is 40, carry the 4. 8 times 2 is 16, plus 4 is 20, carry the 2. 8 times 5 is 40, plus 2 is 42. We're going to add that 7, our remainder, and we will end up with 4,207, which matches our dividend perfectly. We did it correctly. Let's finish up with our division rules, some extra tips, and then a little bit of practice. Here are our division rules. First, put your parking spaces. I can't stress that enough. 2, follow DMSB, divide, multiply, subtract, bring down, to fill up all your parking spaces. Number 3, if you have a number after your final subtraction, that's your remainder. 4, check your work with multiplication. It might seem a little tedious, but it's really helpful in making sure you have the right answer. Here are some extra tips. First, keep your writing neat. Be sure to draw those parking spaces in and make sure everything's lined up nicely. When you have numbers all over the place, that's when mistakes happen. Number 2, be careful with zeros. I didn't have a good example of this, so I'm going to do one with you right now to show you. 804 divided by 4. First, I'm going to put my parking spaces. 4 goes into 8 2 times. 4 times 2 is 8. Subtract, you get 0. Bring down. Now this is what I'm talking about with your zeros. We brought down, we need to start over. How many times can 4 go into 0? 4 cannot go into 0. So sometimes kids like to skip this step, but we have to write in 0. 4 goes into 0 0 times, and then we need to follow all the rest of the steps. So that's our divide. We then multiply 4 times 0, we get 0. We then subtract, we get 0, and then we bring down and we get 4. 4 goes into 4 exactly 1 time. We finish it up. 4 times 1 is 4. We then subtract. We get 0. There's nothing left to bring down. So 201 is our final answer. That's a very important 0 in there. 201 is a lot different than 21. So let's go ahead and do our check just to make sure we did it right. 201 times 4. 4, 0, 8. And that's correct. I just wanted to review that really quickly so you made sure that when you had those zeros that you put your 0 and followed through with multiply, subtract, and bring down. Our last tip is to know your multiplication facts. That's the easiest way to do it. But if you struggle with a set of facts like 7s or 8s, write them over to the side for reference. Let's finish up with a little practice. Here are 2 problems that I would like you to do and to check on a piece of paper. Go ahead and pause your video, and then I'll reveal the answers. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.